All right, I am currently reporting from Newport Beach, California, and I dare you to name any other poker vlogger who drives 20 minutes at night just to get some scenery and break the monotony of his poker vlog. Right, so like I said, I'm literally just here because, well, back in the day, if you guys were around, I used to play all over the place back when I was playing 2.5 and 5.10. Nowadays, it's mostly just Hustler Casino Live, which means you guys only see footage from mostly one casino. In hopes of trying to keep the vlog fresh and new, I try to capture, cool scenery whenever I can. This time around, I didn't really get an opportunity to do that, so I decided to create my own by driving here at whatever time it is, nearly 11 p.m. and filming myself on the beach like a weirdo in front of all these people. By the way, it is so busy in Southern California on the beachfront at 11 p.m. It's ridiculous. Maybe there's some sort of event that I'm missing. Anyways, you guys don't care about that. You want to hear about some poker hands? That's what today is going to be about. We're going to go over a session I played at Hustler Casino Live, as mentioned, a few days ago, and it was quite the big game. Usually when you play a big game, you're either going to win a lot of money or lose a lot of money. Without spoiling any results, let's jump straight into some poker hands. All right, here we go. Playing 100-200 at Hustler Casino. This game quickly became 100-200-400, so quite the big game. There's also a $200 ante from the big blind every hand. Yeah, a lot of money in the pot pre-flop. In the first interesting one, Charles opens up the action to 2,000. Andy makes the call on the button, and I defend the straddle with King 9 offsuit. By the way, you guys will notice the frame rate is slightly weird. There were some technical difficulties happening on the Hustler stream, but they'll be fixed right after this hand. Anyways, 3 ways to a flop on which I flop top pair. It's King, Queen 10, Rainbow. I check. Charles continues betting. He puts in $3,000. Andy folds on the button. Now it's back on me. I've got top pair and a straight draw, so of course I'm going nowhere just yet. I make the call and we get some immediate help on the turn. It's another king, giving me 3 of a kind. I check it again, and this time Charles slows down and checks it. River comes an inconsequential 8, and now I'm going to bet for value since I have 3 of the same card. The pot's around 13,000, so that's how much I throw into the middle. Would also bet this amount if I had some sort of bluff, so that's my reasoning. Charles doesn't think too long before calling, and we end up winning. Of course, I didn't know it at the time, but I got quite lucky to crack pocket aces in the first noteworthy hand of my night. In the next hand, Mars opens up the action from first position. He makes it 2,000 to go, and I'm in middle position with pocket sixes. I think the best course of action with a hand like this is to either raise or call, mostly because of the position that we're in. I don't want to call and then get squeezed behind me, so probably folding is okay. This time I don't fold. Instead, I raise it up to 6,000, gets back around to Mars, and he makes the call. Flop comes great for pocket sixes. It's 8-6-4 Rainbow, giving me a very disguised set, since I would rarely have hands that make a set on this board. This time I do, though, so when he checks, I continue betting. This is a board where I think around 2/3 is the best size, so that's what I put into the pot. Unfortunately, Mars only has 2 overs and I guess a backdoor flush draw. Not much else aside from that, so he lets go of his king jack, but still nice to pick up a pot like this, winning nearly 7,000 in the process. This next hand is certainly more action than that one, though. There's an open from Mike X to 2,000. Charles calls next to act, and then Brittany calls on the button. I am in the small blind with pocket 9s, and I think I rate to have the best hand more often than not. If Charles or Brittany had something better than pocket 9s, I suspect they would have re-raised Mike X themselves. So really the only player I'm worried about is Mike X. I decide to raise it up and try to get heads up with him, or if he gets out of the way, I'm totally fine continuing this pot against Charles or Brittany since, like I said, I feel like I have a better hand than they do. I make it $12,000 to go. Mike X thinks for a bit and lets it go. That's looking good to me. Charles does not, and he also doesn't call. Instead, he decides to go with it, all in for around $56,000. Brittany folds her king 7 unsuited. Now it's back to me, and we've got a decision to make between calling or just getting out of the way. And it's not exactly the easiest spot. It's $46,000 for me to call, so quite a big raise. And I know what I said. Most likely, I've got the best hand. I expect Charles would have raised himself originally if he had pocket 9s or better. But you never know. It's never 100% confidence. What if he was trapping pre-flop with a hand like pocket 10s or pocket jacks, maybe even aces or kings, which he might do occasionally to be tricky? What if he was slow playing a hand like ace king and we're flipping at best? Well, yeah, those are all possibilities, but not something I expect to happen too often. Most likely, I still think I have the best hand, and maybe he's got a smaller pocket pair, which would be quite good for me, of course. So I give it some thought, but I do make the call, and just like that, we are playing an over $100,000 pot, and we're off to see 2 runouts. We're up against pocket 8s, which is great news. We're around 80% to win this one. On the first board, though, that's not going to happen, as Charles makes himself 4 of a kind. On the second board, I flop a set, but Charles turns a straight draw with this 7 of hearts. Looking for a 6 on the river to scoop, but it's just a 5. I end up with a full house, and all that drama leads to a chopped pot. Not gonna lie, it would have been nice to scoop this one, but hey, at least we don't lose the whole pot. Winning 2,000, I'll take it. In the next one, we are once more going to be battling against Charles. This hand starts with him raising up the action to 2,100. Mars makes the call in the small blind, and I've got pocket jacks in the $400 blind. Worthy of a raise, of course, so I make it 12,000 to go. Charles thinks for a bit and makes the call. Mars does not. So we go heads up out of position to a flop of Queen 10-9 rainbow. We're out of position. We've got second pair. Could go either way here between checking or betting small. And I think I like betting a little bit more, so that's what I do. I put in $8,000, and Charles makes the call. Turn card's not great. It's the 10 of hearts pairing the middle card, and that's generally going to favor the guy who called pre-flop. So for that reason, I decide to check and see what Charles wants to do. And what Charles wants to do is bet $20,000, right around half pot. I gotta admit, this is a good bet. He's got around 40,000 behind, and if he went all in, it probably would have looked a little bit weaker, but betting just half pot, it does not really look like a bluff. In fact, I don't even really know if he is bluffing or not. Perhaps he's betting his ace-9 suited for value, putting me on a hand like ace-king. You gotta ask Charles. I don't know, but all I know is I've got pocket jacks, which essentially is just a bluff catcher because, of course, we now lose to a queen or any 10, and I don't expect him to bet a 9. Of course, that's exactly what he's doing in this instance, and I didn't know this. Regardless, I've got a decision to make. We have an open-ender and a bluff catcher. Can't blame me for making the call. But after some thought, I come to the conclusion that I could have a lot of better hands like any queen. I could occasionally have a 10 myself. I could have an overpair. So pocket jacks feels a little bit too light here, especially because we have removal to some possible bluffs. Hands like ace-jack offsuit, which is an open-ended straight draw that he might be bluffing with. Yeah, it's not ideal to have pocket jacks because of that. So a little bit tight, but I decide to let this one go. And unfortunately for me, Charles was either value betting a worse hand or bluffing. I'm not sure. Either way, he gets the pot. I don't. Nice hand, Charles. In this next hand, Mars has to post the blinds, so he throws in $1,000 as a straddle. And I look down at ace-king suited in early position. I raise it up to 2,500. Peter makes the call, but then when it gets back to Mars, he decides that's not enough and kicks it up to $12,000. Pretty strong considering that I raised from a somewhat early position, but it's Mars. He can get out of line sometimes, and he might be doing that extra light since Peter made the call behind me, which he might see as some dead money if I don't have a great hand either. So with ace-king suited, of course, it is a great hand. This is a non-decision. We're going to put in another raise. Calling is probably also fine, but then Peter gets a price behind me to continue, and I don't really want to play ace-king 3 ways, although I don't really hate the idea of it. I decide to raise, though. I make it 28,000, barely more than a min raise, but just enough to get Peter out of the way, which he does, but now Mars does not get out of the way. Instead, he announces all in, and I think it's clear at this point that he's got a good hand. But of course, I do as well, so can't go anywhere with ace-king suited. If he's got aces or kings, it's just a cooler. If he's got ace-king himself, we're free rolling, assuming he's not suited. If he's got queens or jacks, we're flipping. Good things can happen, but not this hand. We're up against kings. As you guys can see, though, it's still not the worst thing ever. I've got 42% chances of winning this hand. Not bad at all. We decide to run it twice. Unfortunately for me, I get no help on either board, and we're going to get scooped in this 6-figure pot. Pretty rough one, if I'm being honest. The session was going okay up until this moment. Suddenly we went from having a decent day to down a bunch of money. And that's kind of the nature of coolers in these high-stakes games. They're often going to dictate whether or not you have a great night. In this case, I am on the wrong end of it. Nothing to do but add some more chips and try to get out of the hole now. In this next one, Peter straddles on my left to 800, and Mike X limps in from middle position. Action gets to me in the $400 straddle / third blind, and I've got 7-3 offsuit, which is pretty much a garbage hand. But it's only $400 for me to call into a pot that's going to be around $3,000. So we're getting a ridiculous price to complete. I toss in the extra money and Peter checks. So we go 3 ways to a flop. None of us have a great hand. And the board comes out 9-8-5 rainbow. Before we go any further, however, I wanted to quickly make note of the fact that despite me getting an incredible price to complete, I don't think I should be doing that with a hand like this. It's just too weak of a hand, and it doesn't matter that we're getting an amazing price. Gotta just put this one in the muck. But anyways, moving on. I have a straight draw, not much else aside from that. I check, Peter checks, and now Mike bets $1,000, right around 1/3 of the size of the pot. Now, with my exact hand, we've got a gutter, and that's about it. One of the worst hands I'll ever have in this spot, but this is a board that'll often favor me as I completed from the middle blind. I could have straights, sets, and I don't think Mike is going to be too strong after limping in pre-flop. Of course, he could have a hand like 7-6 or 2-pair, I guess, maybe even a set, but I suspect all hands that flop 2-pair or sets would have raised pre-flop, so I'm putting him on, at best, a single pair holding. I'm going to try to take advantage of the fact that this is a good board for me, and I don't think he's got a great hand. So I check raise to $4,000. Peter folds. Mike X does not. He makes the call, which I was somewhat expecting. I don't really expect to win it right away with a check raise on the flop, at least not too often, but my plan is to win this hand on turns and rivers potentially, or at least try to. Turn card is good. It's the King of Hearts, which to me looks like a complete brick. Of course, as you guys can see, that gives Mike X 2 pair. He only had an 8, so, you know, if the turn was a queen or a jack or an ace, I probably could have gotten away with this, but that's not going to happen this time. I continue betting, though. I'm going to pretend I've got a straight or something good. I put in $12,000. Mike X thinks for a bit and makes the call. At this point, I think it's obvious he's got something pretty good. But at the same time, this board isn't really one that he's going to be super strong on. So unless he flopped a straight, I still think he's probably got a hand like ace-9 suited, maybe queen-9 suited. Could also have hands like jack-10 suited or just jack-10 offsuit for an open-ender. Maybe even 10-9. That's just a stubborn top pair on the flop and doesn't want to release on the turn. River comes a 3 of clubs, giving me some showdown value. Now we have a question between going for it or just checking and giving up. I gave it some thought, and like I said on the turn, I do put him on hands like Jack-10 or maybe even 10-7 suited occasionally, often enough that I think checking and try to win at showdown isn't the worst idea. So that's what I do. I'm expecting Mike X to just check back. He does not, though. Instead, he puts in a bet of $24,000, which I find quite peculiar. Now, I'll be the first to say, I've got like 17th pair. This is a pretty straightforward fold. And I don't blame that line of thinking whatsoever. In fact, that was my instinct when he put in the $24,000. That said, my idea all along in this hand was that he either had a single pair holding or he had some sort of draw that missed. Now, if that's what we're putting him on, what single pair holding would bet the river for value? I can't think of a single one. Not even pocket aces, probably. So yeah, this bet is a little bit confusing to me because I think it represents either a very strong hand or a missed draw, both of which I guess he could have, but 7-6 is unlikely as I've got a 7, and I don't know, 2 pair, there's not many combinations of it. You guys could probably guess where this is going. This is quite a loose call from my end if I do make it. And honestly, I should probably just fold because I could have a lot of better hands. And I think that's just the bottom line at this juncture of the hand. It doesn't matter that he's not representing a whole lot of hands. At the end of the day, I could have much better hands to call with. This is not one of them, but I end up talking to myself into a curious call. Part of that had to do with the fact that it's Mike X. And against players like Mike who aren't there to try to capture every edge and win every single hand, I'm happy giving them some light action. So, that and other factors that I just described led to this call. Not my proudest moment, not my best hand ever, but, when you play on stream exclusively, your best moments are going to be captured as well as your not so best moments. So, hope you guys enjoyed. Nice hand, Mike. Enjoy your 2-pair victory. Moving on to the next hand, in which I have pocket tens. That is way better than 7-3 offsuit, so I don't want to hear any judgment. Folds to me on the button. I raise it up to 1,000, and only Charles makes the call from the third blind. Heads up to a flop, which is not good for my hand. It's ace king 6 with 2 spades, but it's a board that's very good for me. So when Charles checks, I elect to bet the size of the pot, which I think is the best possible play on a board like this. Put in $2,500. Charles makes the call with his second pair. Turn card's good. It's the queen of diamonds, meaning I could now have all sorts of 2-pair sets and of course a straight as well. So when he checks, I am going to continue betting. Pot's 7,500, and I think if I had strong hands, I would bet over the size of the pot. So with my pocket tens having removal to the nuts, and of course, like I said, an advantage on a board like this, I elect to do just that. I put in $10,000. Charles quickly lets go of his king 8 offsuit, and we win this one. Not a huge pot, but a moral victory nonetheless. This next hand, however, is a lot more intense than that previous one. In fact, I dare to say it is the hand of the night, so strap in. Kind of similar to the last hand, actually. It gets to me on the button. I've got Queen Jack suited, a beautiful hand. I open it up to 1,000. Nick Airball calls in the big blind with Jack 9 suited, and now Charles has himself a real hand in the $400 blind. He's got pocket kings. He raises it up to 5,000. Now it's on me on the button, and with a hand like Queen Jack suited, we will always be continuing. We have position, and we're getting a decent price. However, it's a question of whether we want to re-raise or just call and try to go to a flop. Now, with a hand like this, I think you could go either way, but it's got a lot of playability, and I don't really see the need for getting out of line against Charles, considering that he doesn't really do a whole lot of pre-flop bluffing in my experience. So I decide to just call. Nick Airball thinks for a bit and folds his Jack 9 suited, but of course he wishes he hadn't, because he would have flopped 3 of a kind. 9, 9, 10, rainbow. There is a heart out there, so, that gives me 2 overs, an open-ended straight draw, and a backdoor flush draw. And as you guys can see, it gives Charles the overpair. This is what you call an action flop. Charles starts off with a bet of $5,000, and I don't see much point to raising. Maybe once in a blue moon, it's okay, but I decided to just call, and we get some instant help on the turn. It's the king of spades. Right, maybe instant help is not the best selection of words, because really it's the death card for me. As you guys can see, that gives him a full house, and it gives me the nut straight. I've got no way of knowing this, of course, so when Charles wisely checks it over to me, it's time to start betting for value. If he's got a hand like aces, pocket queens, pocket jacks, ace king, ace 10 suited, all these sorts of strong holdings he might play this way, we can get lots of value. And of course, if I had a bluff like 8-7 suited or 7-6 suited, perhaps, these different sorts of hands that I might try to float the flop and steal later on with, of course, I'd start bluffing with those as well. So pot is around 22,000. That's how much I throw into the middle. Charles thinks it over for a bit, and luckily does not fold. He makes the call, which to me looks like great news, putting him on a hand like ace king or pocket aces at this point. So when the river comes the 8 of spades, despite the fact that it brings in the backdoor flush draw, when he checks it over to me, I think we still have to bet for value. And that's for 2 reasons. Number one is that I have a pretty strong hand. And secondly, there are plenty of hands I would be bluffing with. So checking back a straight seems a bit criminal. Of course, if we get check raised all in, it's going to be quite disgusting, but that's just a risk you have to take sometimes. Can't be checking back hands in fear of monsters under the bed. So I think this one over. Pot's around 65,000. How much would I bet with a strong hand? How much would I bet with a weak hand? How much would I bet with a bluff? All these thoughts are running through my mind. And on a board texture like this, I think half pot is the magic number. So I throw in a bet of $35,000. Charles does not seem pleased. I'm happy to not get snap called, since he might do that with the backdoor nut flush, for example. Perhaps a hand like ace jack of spades or ace queen of spades that plays this way. So when he doesn't do that, I think we've most likely got him beat. Rooting for a call. It never comes, though. Instead, he announces all in. Brutal spot for me. Disgusting situation now. But I told myself when I bet the river I was likely folding to a jam, despite knowing that I'd be getting a great price to call. As you guys can see here, it's only 57,000. Of course, that's a lot of money, but compared to the size of the pot, I hardly have to be right to make it a profitable call. He's got to be bluffing like once out of 4 times or something like that, and that'll make it okay for me to call. But is he bluffing 1 out of 4 times? I don't think so. Maybe he is. I don't know. Charles is a capable player. He could be doing this with a hand like ace 10 suited, maybe ace jack with the ace of spades. Maybe he's turning pocket aces with the ace of spades into a bluff. I don't know. That would be quite a creative play by him, but you know, he is capable, I think. So yeah, this is a really close spot. As you guys can see, I am not happy whatsoever, especially after having a frustrating day. Running into situations like these can be quite tough mentally. I also just had a really tough loss a few weeks ago on Hustler. I lost $250,000, biggest loss of my life. And I have been on a small upswing since then, but not nearly enough to make this session easy to stomach. Especially a spot like this. It's not easy. It takes me a while. But in the end, I decide to make what I think is the right decision. The disciplined decision, not something I say often, and let this one go. I fold, and I'm happy to see later on that we were up against top full house. Luckily, we end up saving $57,000. No small chunk of change. Once again, nice hand, Charles. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the last interesting hand for myself on this night. Brittany raises it up to 1,200. I am next to act with ace king. Powerful cards, so I put in a powerful raise. I make it $4,000 to go. Action folds around to Mike X in the big blind, and he makes the cold call with 8-7 of clubs, and that gives Brittany a good price. She comes along as well. So the 3 of us are going to a flop, which comes 7 deuce deuce rainbow, the driest of dry boards. Mike X checks. Brittany decides to lead out for $4,000. Not really sure what this lead means, but I suspect she's got either a 7 or some sort of pocket pair that she thinks might be ahead. And, you know, technically she might not be wrong, but what I'm trying to say is it doesn't seem like the strongest bet on the planet, so I'm going to pretend I've got an overpair. I did re-raise pre-flop, so I think that's a credible story to tell. I raise it up to $12,000, and now that puts Mike X in quite the difficult spot with his 8-7. And I don't blame him for eventually making this fold. I mean, what's he supposed to do? Call and then just call all the way down, hoping that I'm bluffing and that Brittany doesn't have a better hand than him? I don't know. Seems like a tough spot. And I guess that's kind of the whole thing with cold calling pre-flop. It can put you in some dicey situations later on. Anyway, Mike X does indeed let go of his 8-7 suited, and Brittany folds her jack high, which I accidentally turn over with my hand as she mucks. Didn't mean to do that. Sorry, Brittany. Anyway, we take this one down, which is quite nice. We win $12,000, a little bit of a Band-Aid after the previous hand. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the last interesting one of my night. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed the hands, despite things not going too well for me. Right, so as you guys saw, things didn't go particularly well for me. By the way, I just noticed I look kind of weird. It's because I'm holding the camera with both hands. This thing is heavy, all right? Don't judge me. Heavy like the loss I took at Hustler. $130,000 in the wrong direction. And if you guys have been paying attention, it has been a rough month for me. I lost $250K a few weeks ago.
I was on the comeback trail around 100,000 and, you know, green towards the right way, but then gave back 130K. So back down to below the starting point from this downswing. Not ideal. Most of the hands seem pretty normal, aside from maybe the 7-3 versus Mike X, questionable at best. But aside from that, all the hands seem nothing special to me. Really, it's only just a big loss because the game is so big. And usually when you play a huge game, even if none of the spots are particularly exciting, if you run bad or, you know, don't get into a lot of good situations, you're going to lose a lot of money. That's what happened with me. Just going to try to play better, run better, find better results, etc. But yeah, as always, thank you guys for the support. Thank you for watching. If nothing else, maybe give this video a thumbs up because, like I said, I drove all the way out to this beach just to keep you guys a little more entertained than you otherwise might be. That's all I got for you. Until next time, good luck at your local tables. Peace.